obviously the key thing is to make money at the end of the day for your clients.
Yes.
But what exactly do you look at after that?
Is it a conflict of interest? It looks like it to me. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we've got a curious connection I found in Mark Carney's world. Let's jump into this. With the recent cabinet shuffle, Mark Carney bringing in some new deputy ministers, he's starting to play his hand here and bring in more of his A-team. And I want to go back to this clip here from November 24th, where we've got Michael Cooper grilling this guy here. Remember Justin Bieber from Brookfield Corporation? Brookfield's portfolio has over 1,900 companies. I'm starting to find more and more connections between Carney, Brookfield, and another entity that Mark Carney set up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bieber, you stated earlier that there are 2,000 Brookfield-owned and operated companies. I would note that only 103 of these companies have been publicly disclosed by Mr. Carney and are subject to his ethics screen. In other words, 95% of Brookfield companies are not the subject of the ethics screen.
Yeah, so 95%, I think he said just under 2,000, so 1,900 and something of them, we don't know what they are. I keep digging, I keep finding them, but there's, well, over 1,900 of them. There are so many potential conflicts of interest. What I stumbled upon here is a connection between Mark Carney and Brookfield that isn't the obvious one of his stock options he'll be getting in 2033 and 2034, not to mention all the shares he owns in Brookfield Asset Management, and his notional long-term incentive plan coming from Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1 he set up. There's another one here that is active. No matter which way I look at this, this looks like a conflict of interest. What I'm talking about here today is GFAN's Glasgow Alliance for Net Zero. So Mark Carney set this up with a couple of people. Bill Winters, I showed him in a previous video, him saying this is just a money-making business. It's all about making the money. Mark Carney set this up. This isn't a company. It's a non-profit alliance. It's essentially a group that was trying to persuade big money, big institutional money to go green, essentially. And then Mark Carney, from his disclosure to the Canadian government, we can see not only the stocks that he holds, all of these, but the ones he manages himself are the most important ones. Stripe, north of 60 advisors, all of these ones. So GFANS, which was set up by Mark Carney, I've got the receipts right here. This is right on GFAN's website. This is Mark Carney's website. GFANS was launched in April 2021 by UN Special Envoy on Climate Action and Finance, Mark Carney. So he set this up. It came with help from none other than Michael R. Bloomberg, deepens commitment to moving the world forward beyond coal with plan to turbocharge clean energy finance in global south. Michael Bloomberg has Bloomberg Philanthropies, I can't say that word, Philanthrop, that is funding this non-profit. So GFANS was never meant to make money. It's designed to entice big wealth. Mark Carney's a banker, Goldman Sachs banker, entice big wealth to invest in green climate tech. And I should note, even though they got nuked this past year, they were getting investigated for antitrust in the US government here, this whole report here. Carney's GFANS, a corrupt house of lies, crumbles in disgrace. As you can see right from the report here, judiciaryhouse.gov, the climate cartel's members include, and it's right here, Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero. So Mark Carney had to testify for antitrust, essentially anti-competition, but nothing came for that. They didn't shut down GFANS. It's still operational. If we look down at the bottom here, it says leadership. Mark Carney's face used to be here. Now it's just Michael Bloomberg and Mary Sharapiro. And they have a bunch of other people down here. Now, one of those, you can see Bill Winters. I showed him in that previous video, him talking about how much money they make. Another person, though, that is noteworthy here is up here. Neely Gilbert, chairman, GFANS advisory panel, and chair, David Rockefeller Fund Investment Committee. Now, if you remember from a previous video, the Rockefeller Fund was also financing that UN program, the 17 program, the one with the colored logos. This one, the United Nations 17 goals, the 17 sustainable development goals, and they're listed here: no poverty, no hunger, equal education, reduced inequalities, etc., etc. Partnership for the goals. All this stuff gets tied together. So if you remember a different video that I made recently talking about the guy who created this program, the 17 UN goals, is one of Mark Carney's new hires here of deputy ministers. This cabinet shuffle happened just before Christmas, and that is John MacArthur, now the Deputy Secretary to the Cabinet, Economic Policy and Privy Council Office. So Mark Carney getting his guys close to him here. Clerk of the Privy Council is the highest public sector role in Canada. This guy created that group, the UN 17 goals, also funded by the Rockefeller Foundation here. This video posted on the Rockefeller Foundation YouTube channel. Now jumping back to Neely Gilbert, who's this? As I pointed out here, these connections to Rockefeller, and she's chair of GFAN's advisory panel. She works at Mark Carney's non-profit. it. But if we move on the chart now, we've got her up here. So what's the first thing you see? Brookfield Asset Management. That's right. Neely Gilbert also is involved with Brookfield. So I'm on the Brookfield website here. You can see Brookfield in the top left, Brookfield Board of Directors, and we scroll down and there she is right there, Neely Gilbert. She's independent director at Brookfield. And here's her bio: member of Audit Committee, member of Governance, Nominating and Compensation Committee, vice chairwoman of Carbon Direct, I believe that's her company, and leading scaling carbon management into global industry through investment, science, and client advisory. She's also chair for Glasgow Alliance for Net Zero, Mark Carney's nonprofit. This connection here is a little too convenient. And as I mentioned, the Rockefeller Fund, she's completely wrapped up in net zero, climate, all this stuff. And would you believe it or not, she also went to Harvard University. Did Mark Carney meet her at Harvard? Do all these alumni know each other? Here she is talking about net zero and how it's been tough because more and more countries and people are waking up to it, turning their back against it. And that's why I think Mark Carney, despite the MOU and cutting the carbon tax, this guy is bringing in net zero. He created the net zero program. He is trying to create the demand for net zero so all of these grifters can make money off of it. But as you see Neely talking here, she's admitting it's a problem right now because Donald Trump and the Americans have turned their back on net zero, as well as many other countries are right now.
For the most part, what I see looking across science-based pathways to get to net zero is we're going to need a lot more of all of the things. And when I talk with leaders in finance across banks, asset managers, especially the large ones, and to a certain extent, especially the American and kind of North American one these days, what I hear a lot of them saying is that they feel it's going to be hard to get out ahead of policy. It's going to be hard for them to get out ahead of the climate pathways as they are because they kind of are exposed to the economy, especially the economy and the policy of the country that they're in.
This is exactly the reason why Mark Carney wants to change the policy in Canada, because things are not going well for his investments in eco ESG, but he can change that if he's in charge of Canada, and he is.
We see institutions receiving direct pushback from politicians, especially in red states. You were talking about the congressional hearings just this week. I wonder how you think about that.
And there's a role for carbon capture and sequestration. So I'm all for people doing the research and coming up with technologies. I agree it would be better to have policy. So if that's that's point one, sure, we would be much better with global policy. Or ambitious national policy.
Yeah, sounds like Mark Carney. He doesn't talk about Canada just in the previous video. He talked about global policy. He's a globalist. Does Mark Carney go around say he's a proud Canadian? I doubt it. So now it's time to paint a bit of a picture here on the timeline, because she not only sits on the board of Mark Carney's nonprofit, but also Brookfield. Well, when did she get there? Mark Carney joined Brookfield Vice Chair ESG in August of 2020. Then he became chair of Brookfield Asset Management in December 2022. So basically, starting in August 20, we've got this report directly from Mark Carney's nonprofit here. And this is November 2021. So a little over a year and a couple months after he joins Brookfield. And we can see Neely Gilbert right there listed. She was already part of his company. You notice Mark Carney right there, chair, UN Special Envoy Climate Action Finance. So most likely she was a part of Carney's nonprofit here before this time. Looking at her LinkedIn page here, we've got confirmation here, Harvard University, 1995 to 1999. Now there's potential for overlap here. It's not really that likely, but Mark Carney, I believe, graduated in 1995 with his PhD. And you can see here, she started in 1995, but maybe through parties or alumni or whatever, they know each other from Harvard. Maybe they don't. Either way, it doesn't matter. You can see Rockefeller, you see Glasgow Alliance for Net Zero, Brookfield, and Carbon Direct. Well, look at the timelines here. So independent director at Brookfield from December of 2022. Remember, Mark Carney joined in 2020 to present, which is the important part. She's still an active board director at Brookfield. And same with Glasgow Alliance for Net Zero, Mark Carney's nonprofit from July 2021. That report I showed you said November. This is a couple months earlier, as I suspected, a little bit earlier than this report, which was in November. She joined in July 2021 to present. She's still actively on the advisory panel of Mark Carney's nonprofit. How is this not a direct conflict of interest that Mark Carney set up GFANZ here, with help from Bloomberg and his money, but essentially he's trying to sway big institutional fund, big money into net zero. He sets the policies, then he steps out, he goes over to Brookfield, August 2020. A year later, he brings her on into GFANZ, and then a year after that, she comes over to Brookfield. Now it seems like Mark Carney's got an ally that's both in his nonprofit and in Brookfield, where he's piling up a bunch of his cash. He's got his stock options in Brookfield, as well as his shares in Brookfield, and his notional long-term plan is carried interest he gets from his Brookfield Global Transition Fund. And once again, he's got an ally that's sitting in his nonprofit, getting all that information. Big companies come in and tell them where they want to invest their money in green tech, whether it's solar panels or this, that, or the other. Say it's solar panels, and there's $3 trillion of investment coming from multiple places like the UAE, and they want to invest in solar panels. Well, then what stops her from going over to Brookfield next week for the board meeting and saying, maybe we should do solar panels? I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of money flowing into solar panels from the Middle East. And who's set to benefit from that? Well, not only her, but Mark Carney. To me, it looks like he's got an ally on the inside on both sides there that already knows the agenda he wants to roll out, because it's her agenda too. She's the vice chairwoman of Carbon Direct. She has her own carbon company here. Carbon Direct is a leading scaling carbon management into global industry through both climate-related investments and client advisory. Basically, she invests in companies using other companies' money. That's what it seems like to me. We combine science, capital, and technology to deliver high-quality CO2 solutions at scale. Here she is 6 years ago talking about investing in green companies. And what does it come down to? It's all money. It's all profit.
To a successful shared long-term future. So that meant, for example, screening out fossil fuel stocks.
Right. So break it down one by one. You look obviously at whether a company is financially successful or not. And obviously the key thing is to make money at the end of the day for your clients.
Yes.
But what exactly do you look at after that?
So you're right. We are
You're right. The key thing is to make money for your clients. The goal isn't to benefit the environment. It's just to make money for the clients, no matter what. Once again, if Mark Carney really cared about the environment, he would have kept the 2 billion trees program that Trudeau brought in. He didn't actually care.
Financial first investors. We are hired to make money for our clients. And in order to do that, essentially, to beat the markets, we have to find issues that we think may be mispriced on average by other investors. And when it comes to environmental issues, social issues, and governance issues, many investors just have trouble figuring out how to integrate that information into their portfolios. So we think that there are some ripe areas to be able to add to returns by focusing on what we call ESG, for environmental, social, governance integration.
And this is a new tool, isn't it? Relatively new tool.
The tools are relatively new because the data is relatively new.
Right.
When you actually, responsible investing goes all the way back in this country in the Quakers to the 1700s. But if you want to be able to use these tools to evaluate whole portfolios of stocks, you need pretty robust data sets, and you need some historical data as well to see how.
The problem with data, as we're finding, is either it was done improperly, or scientists were fudging it or making up data based off of computer models, and that's not real. That's what's been coming out recently. This is all hocus pocus to make money.
Things have evolved over time. And those types of data sets are newer, started coming around in the 00s, and have become much more sophisticated today.
With the timelines I showed you, Mark Carney going to Brookfield, then bringing her on into his nonprofit a year later, and then a year after that, she comes into Brookfield. Just listen to what she says here and think about her and her relation now to Brookfield with that timeline in mind.
We thought it might be rather fun to ask you, as an ethical investor, whether you've ever changed your mind about a company or a group of companies, whether you've ever thought that they might not be appropriate for your customers, and then changed your mind because you've looked deeper into the data.
Well, it's funny that you should ask that. There's one principle that we are putting forward strongly in our work right now, which is that it's actually not always the best thing to do to focus on just investing in the companies that are perfect from an environmental, social, or governance standpoint right now, but actually to be willing to invest in the companies that are showing positive long-term trends, may not be perfect yet, but that you say, you know what, this company is one where I think that they will change my mind.
Okay.
And if
Like Brookfield, the same company that owns one of the biggest coal facilities in the world, the Darby Mill, whatever it's called in Australia, or has oil in the UAE or in Brazil, it sounds like she's talking about Brookfield.
that's the case, then if you're a long-term investor, why not get involved as an investor now so that you can be part of the net benefits that will accrue as the company improves and starts to change other investors' minds, which will help you to earn an attractive return from being early and providing that long-term capital.
That's the key.
She sounds exactly like Mark Carney. And she's doing the exact same thing as Mark Carney. You might think she'd be working at Mark Carney's nonprofit and sits on the panel of Brookfield.
To beating the market, as you were saying just now.
Exactly.
Finally, thematic.
Yeah, beating the market. Okay. Does anyone else find a problem with this? This lady, part of Carney's nonprofit, now part of Brookfield. Mark Carney invested in Brookfield, and she's wearing that pin of the 17 UN sustainability goals. Mark Carney is bringing in his A-team. I keep saying it. I wouldn't be surprised if he starts bringing in people from G-Fans into the government.